A few years ago, Elijah Craig started allowing single barrel selection pickers to have their whiskey bottled at barrel proof instead of 94 proof. Are they as good as the highly coveted ECBP Small Batch releases? If you want to find out, then stick around. Little disclaimer before we get started. Some of you all have gotten used to seeing my lovely wife Lindsay on the podcast, but she is on antibiotics and she cannot drink today. And we ran out of episodes, so I've got to do the next couple episodes without her, but she will be back soon. So first off, let's jump right into it. What is Elijah Craig Barrel Proof? Well, in March 2013, Heaven Hill, which is the distillery that owns the Elijah Craig brand, started to release 3 barrel proof releases per year. And at the time, they used a different bottle that we now refer to as the Pirate bottle. And I happen to have a couple of those in my collection that I bought right before I knew that bottle was going to go away. But in 2016, they announced that they were going to drop the 12-year age statement from the whiskey because up until that point, all Elijah Craigs were age stated as at least 12 years old on the front label. Their common everyday small batch release was a 12-year. But in January of 2017, they released the new bottle design, and at the same time, they also switched the size of the batches that they were releasing in the barrel proof releases from 100 barrels to 200 barrels. And that was also when they dropped the 12-year age statement. And so now all of the batches since January 2017 have been 8 to 12-year-old barrels. Previous to that, from 2013 up to 2017, they were all 12-year-old barrels. So they started using a system at that time to give you information about each release. So since there were 3 releases per year, each release would have an A or B or a C on it so that you knew it was the first, second, or third release. And the second bit of information in the name would be what month of the year it was released. So if it was January, it'd be a 1. If it was May, it'd be a 5. And then the last bit of information would be the last 2 digits are the year in which it was released. So as an example, if it said B523, it meant it was the second release of the year. It was released in the 5th month of the year 2023. So that is a little bit confusing because since they switched to this naming system, every A release has been in January, and every B release has been in May, and every C release has been in September. And so it seems kind of unnecessary to have both bits of information, but maybe one day they anticipate not releasing it in those exact months, and then you'll have the information on what month it was released in. The singular back when this bottle design change was happening and they were dropping the 12-year age statement, they offered single barrel selections, but they were all at 94 proof. And what's funny is if you go to the Elijah Craig Wikipedia page, it still says that they only allow single barrel selections in 94 proof. But that's actually not true. I had been fighting for them to offer a barrel proof, and one time I was lucky enough to be at a dinner with Brenny Lubbers, who's the I believe the international brand ambassador for all of Heaven Hill's whiskey brands. And I asked him, I said, why won't they let us barrel it or bottle it at barrel proof after we pick the barrel? And he said basically they were worried that if they allowed their single barrel selections to be a barrel proof, that it would cannibalize their small batch sales. And they might have had a good reason to be worried about that, because if you go look at the Elijah Craig products, their regular 94 proof small batch is on the shelves right now at My Total Wine for $28.99. And the barrel proof version, what we call ECBP, is typically $75.99 at the same store. So when you think about that, that's almost 3 times as expensive. But you don't have 1/3 of the original whiskey in there, which is what you'd have to justify that price difference. So what that tells us is that even though those are current prices, there's always been that large of a gap between the price of the small batch and the barrel proof small batch. And that tells us that they've always had a massive profit margin on the barrel proof. So they probably wouldn't have wanted to jeopardize that with their single barrel selection program. But luckily for us, a few years ago, they did change their position. And I have been able to participate in 2 Elijah Craig Single Barrel Selects that were bottled at cask strength for my whiskey club. Some wouldn't say whiskey. And it got me to thinking, are the Single Barrel Selects better? I mean, they cost more. So the regular small batch barrel proofs, the ECBPs, are $75.99. But at that same Total Wine, when they have a Single Barrel Select that's cask strength, it's $92.99. And so massive markup. Is it worth it? So the way we're going to test that question is I had Chrissy Lynn pour off camera a blind. There are 2 Single Barrel Selects that are barrel proof here, and then B523 and C923 from last year's ECBP releases. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rate them blind and give you the results. So without further ado, let's start tasting up and smelling some whiskey and see if I can rank these. And I am curious to find out, will the small batch come out on top, or will it be the single barrels? All right, that was a tough one, folks. There was one that was clearly in last place for me, but getting the order of the other 3 was very, very difficult, and I am not even sure that I got it right. I had to go back and forth so many times. I actually emptied one of my glasses. So let's do the big reveal. Chrissy Lynn put the bottles right here in the order. So on my far left, we had a small batch C923. Number 2, we had the first single barrel selection we did. Number 3, we had B523. And number 4, we had the second single barrel selection that I did. So how did they rank? So surprisingly, C923 came in last place for me. And that's because when comparing this to these others, if you all remember, C923 was a little bit higher aged than what you normally get from an Elijah Craig. And today, that extra time in the barrel gave it a hint of a acrid barrel char flavor that I wasn't enjoying today. And so it came in last place. The first single barrel selection that I did was the one that I could not figure out how to rank it against the others. And I ended up putting it in second place because it had it wasn't going to go into first place because it was very similar in palate and enjoyability as my number 1, but it lost on nose. And so this single barrel selection was second place. First place, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly for my palate, was the youngest ECBP they've ever released as a small batch, and that is B523. I can sometimes be a little bit sensitive to barrel char flavors, and the amount of time that this spent in the barrel is plenty to give it the flavors that you need. And so that came in first place for me. And in third place was the other single barrel selection that we did. But to be very honest, the 2 single barrel selections were the ones that I spent the most time going back and forth on. I could not figure out where they ranked. And what put the B523 in first place for me was there was just a hint more of vanilla and caramel on the front end, and just a slight bit more of a fruit component in the mid palate that kind of helped round it all out. And I did not get as much bitterness on the finish as I did on C923. So find that very interesting. So to answer the question, are the single barrel selections worth it? I think they are. They're a really neat thing to have. Of course, they're fun to participate in. They are a little bit more money, but if you're going to get deeply involved in this hobby, when you get the opportunity to buy a barrel at this level or a bottle at this level, you're probably going to end up taking it. And because it is high proof, it's not the kind of thing that you're going to be drinking a whole lot of at one time. You can keep it around and enjoy it for a very long time. I think that it's still a relative value, even though they mark the price up so significantly over what the small batch version of this would be, which could honestly just be these same barrels, but with a little bit more water added. So anyway, if you're new to this channel, I want to let you know we do a free giveaway on every episode. And in this particular instance, we are going to be giving away 2 1-ounce sample packs of all 4 of these whiskeys that you just saw me taste. And that will give 2 of you the opportunity to create this experience for yourself at home. All you have to do to enter that free giveaway is like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. Ringing the bell when you subscribe to a YouTube channel is going to give you push notifications when there's new content. And in my case, it's going to be notifying you of more free giveaways. And most importantly, you have to fill out the web form that is in the video description below. So if you're listening to this on audio, you're going to have to go to the YouTube channel, find the video description, but it is literally just below the video in the player. You go to the video description, there's a link in there. So hopefully you enjoyed this content. If you would like to consider supporting this channel, I'd like to let you know we do have a Patreon account. There's a lot of member benefits. It's not just a monthly donation. We have a lot of bonus content, special offers, what we call distillery takeovers. We have 2 of those scheduled and coming up soon. So if you, we have a 2-day excursion event in Louisville, Kentucky, where we're doing multiple distillery tours, private tours, tasting out of barrels, all of that good stuff. We do barrel picks, and for those that don't go on the tours, they get the exclusive right to purchase those bottles whenever they come out. We have in-person meetups. We have monthly virtual bottle shares, discounts on merch, and you also get the satisfaction of knowing you're supporting the channel and its mission. You can also buy merchandise if you want to support the channel. And all you have to do is go to bourbonrealtalk.com, and we have a lot of merch that's been made by whiskey people for whiskey people, so we think that you'll find some things over there that you'll enjoy. And my real estate company, because I'm also a real estate agent, has been subsidizing this channel since its inception. And if you need residential real estate services in the Dallas or Houston metro areas, you can find a link to my real estate company in the video description below. So, we are all about bringing people together. So let me tell you about our show philosophy. A few years ago, I lost my younger brother to suicide. And in the aftermath of his passing and trying to kind of piece together what led up to him making that decision, I discovered through talking with his friends that he had lost a lot of the social connections around him. And at the same time, my involvement in the whiskey enthusiast world was growing, and I started noticing how whiskey helped create the kinds of social connections that my brother was missing. And it made me wonder whether or not, if I could get you connected to whiskey, whether or not whiskey would do the rest of the job and get you connected to others. And so that's part of the reason why we started this podcast. But the other thing that we realized we needed to do is, if you're creating connection, you need forums so that you can meet and talk with one another. And a lot of the whiskey forums are filled with negativity and hate. And so we ended up creating Bourbon Real Talk Community, which is a free Facebook-based online forum. You can get in there. There's lots of great things going on, lots of community support, lots of sharing and, things like that. But not only did we realize we needed to have a troll-free environment, but those trolls also taught us that if they can hate online, we can love online. And that's why we end every show the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.